Good evening, because I just have to start with saying that all the time. It's great to be with you. Again, I got to say that all the time. If you watch enough of the videos, you realize I open saying the same thing all the time. I usually close about the same as well. And then people make fun of me if I say something odd. But it is always great to be with you, to be able to share with you and to teach and to study together as we dig into the Word of God together. Just a reminder, what we're digging into at this time, we've been looking at our series, and like I said, I just did it to be cool. Gave it the title, Unlocking Daniel. And as if I'm doing something that nobody else has done before. Now, I'll tell you, everything I teach, you can probably find 100 people who teach the exact same thing. And that's a good thing. If you ever run into somebody who says, this has never been taught before, or you're not being taught this kind of stuff, start questioning what they're teaching. Because generally, I will tell you, 99% of people say that, it's been taught before, somewhere's in the history. And if they're saying no one's ever taught it before, odds are it's heresy. It's false teaching. Second, if they can ever find anybody else who's ever taught it before, they might want to start questioning why. It means it probably has nothing to do with anything. So it's just a catchy title. Really what we've been doing is we've been studying through the book of Daniel. And if you were with us last time, you're like, wait a minute, weren't we just in chapter 9? Why are we going backwards in the book? Because remember, I've been looking at this chronologically, just do something a little different. So in other words, we're not doing it thematically, where the theme of the book is really history and then prophecy. I've been doing the history and then doing the prophecy when it fits that aspect of history. And that's kind of what's been going on. So we hit now after chapter 9 during the reign of Darius is where we're going to be looking at. And tonight, it's not going to be anything that's, I'm going to say deep or profound. Doesn't mean you're not going to get a lesson from it. If you grew up attending church, attending Sunday schools, VBSs, hopefully youth groups as well, you've heard this event. We're going to be looking at Daniel chapter 6, which is Daniel in the den of lions. It's one of those Old Testament events that gets taught constantly. If you want, you get like Moses in Egypt, the plagues, the crossing of the Red Sea, David and Goliath, and then you generally get Daniel in the lion's den. So it's one of those Old Testament stories that really gets told a lot of. But we're going to dig into it. We're going to unpack. Maybe you'll learn a couple of things here as we go together. If not, may just be a good reminder to you, because we need those reminders as well. The older we get, the less we seem to remember. And I think that's really just because you put more stuff in there and it gets harder to recall it. It's really the way it goes. If you think your brain's like a computer, you stick more and more files in there. Think about like a library. If you want, we'll use library. If you only have like 3 books, it's not hard to find the 3 books. If you start having 300 books, and someone says, oh, do you have this book? You're like, well, I know I got the book here somewhere, and you start to search for that information. And that's why you can look where you get some of the very smartest teachers and professors that you'll end up calling them absent-minded. It's generally because they have so much information in there that they just kind of go, okay, where's the information that I need, kind of thing. But that's kind of the way we get when we get older. So we're going to get a reminder tonight in Daniel chapter 6 of Daniel in the den of lions. But before we continue, let's just open with a word of prayer. Oh, Father God, I just thank you to be together. I thank you that we're able to gather, and I thank you that you've made it so accessible to be able to look at your word. That, Father, we can have it in print form, we can have it in digital form, we can have it in audio form. And so, Father, I pray that we would continue to yearn for your word and that we would yearn for understanding. And that, Lord, when we come to your word, I pray that we won't just rely on human understanding, but we would sincerely ask you, the author, to teach us, to open our eyes. And so, Father, tonight, as we look at an event that may be very familiar to us, I pray that we would hear you speaking in the way that we need. And that, Father, that your word, we would know that it's living, it's active, and that, Father, ultimately, as we learn your word, we learn more about you, and we see that we have even more reason to praise. And so, Father, I pray that throughout our study that you are glorified, that you are honored, and in all things that you are worshiped. And I praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, as I said, it's no surprise tonight, Daniel in the den of lions. As I said, many people are familiar with this. If you attend Sunday school, VBSs, that kind of thing growing up, it's now, you should be familiar. Truthfully, I think one of the weaknesses of churches that has happened in some places, they've gotten away from teaching even the basic stories. The two weaknesses that you can find in this is, one is not teaching it, and two is, I'll say, teaching it incorrectly. And he said, well, can you teach it incorrectly? Well, sure you can. If there's one theme that I drive home through all of this, this is all about God and who he is. And the one theme, and we'll hit this even tonight, and I call it the most important item. I said if I had a test at the end of we're done Daniel, it'd be the one question I'll ask you. And that is the sovereignty of God. It's about him. It's about he's in control, that he will do all things for his glory. And in tonight, you're going to see that again in the end with Darius' proclamation. That he's going to do it too, just like Nebuchadnezzar did. That they're ultimately going to praise the God in heaven. And so is there a way to teach the events wrong? Well, sure there is. And it's to make it all about us. And that's often what happens. You can be the hero. You're going to overcome. And as much as we look at the book of Daniel, these are perfect examples. You're like, well, Daniel went into the lion's den and he came out completely unscathed. Therefore, and they'll draw this conclusion, that that's going to happen to you. You're going to come out unscathed from these events. That didn't always happen. In fact, it really didn't. If you study the life of Jeremiah, Jeremiah didn't escape unscathed in the end. And I'm not talking about just the fact that he's been thrown into a pit, that he was abused, that he had to go into hiding. In the end, he was dragged to Egypt where he didn't want to go. And there he died. And then you look at some of the others and you run into this. When you look at the Hall of Heroes in Hebrews, a lot of people like to look at the top, but you go to that end section and he talks about those who've been sawed in two, thrown in prison, burned alive. It doesn't always happen. So there is a wrong way to teach this when you make it about you. But even this event here in Daniel, we will see it is still about God and him revealing himself. So before we go on, we're going to read the event. Let's go to read it. Daniel chapter 6, the entire chapter, because we're going to get through it all tonight. And sometimes you go, that seems a little excessive, but it's because it's an event that's so familiar to us. So Daniel chapter 6 to the end of the chapter. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps, to be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 governors, of whom Daniel was one, that the satraps might give an account to them, so that the king would suffer no loss. Then this Daniel distinguished himself above the governors and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king gave thought to setting him over the whole realm. So the governors and satraps sought to find some charge against Daniel concerning the kingdom. But they could find no charge or fault, because he was faithful, nor was there any error or fault found in him. Then these men said, shall not find any charge against this Daniel, unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God. So the governors and satraps thronged before the king, and said thus to him, King Darius, live forever. All the governors of the kingdom and administrators and satraps, the counselors and advisors, have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now the king established the decree and signed the writing, so that it cannot be changed, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter. Therefore, King Darius signed the written decree. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home, and in his upper room, with his windows open toward Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times that day, and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as was his custom since early days. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. And they went before the king and spoke concerning the king's decree. Have you not signed a decree that every man who petitions any god or man within 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? Then the king answered and said, the thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter. So they answered and said before the king, that Daniel, who is one of the captives from Judah, does not show due regard for you, O king, or for the decree that you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. And the king, when he heard these words, was greatly displeased with himself, and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. Then these men approached the king and said to the king, Know, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and Persians that no decree or statute which the king established may be changed. So the king gave the command, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. But the king spoke, saying to Daniel, Your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you. Then a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signets of his lords, that the purpose concerning Daniel might not be changed. Now the king went into his palace and spent the night fasting, and no musicians were brought before him. Also his sleep went from him. Then the king arose very early in the morning and went in haste to the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried out with a lamenting voice to Daniel. The king spoke, saying to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions? Then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, so that they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. And also, O king, I have done no wrong before you. Now the king was exceedingly glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no injury whatever was found on him, because he believed in his God. And the king gave command, and they brought those men who had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions, them, their children, and their wives. And the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces before they ever came to the bottom of the den. Then King Darius wrote, To all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and steadfast forever. His kingdom is the one which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall endure to the end. He delivers and rescues, and he works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. Who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions? So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. All right. As I said, that shouldn't be overly a surprise. If you're familiar with it, you can find plenty of videos and things teaching Daniel in the lion's den. But nonetheless, we're going to work through this a little bit. But as I said, there's one item that is above all else, and it's the sovereignty of God. In this one, I'm choosing verse 26 and 27, which is Darius' decree. Darius proclaims, For he is the living God and steadfast forever. His kingdom is one which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall endure to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. And the sign that he proved was delivering Daniel. He's saying that Darius, at the end here, because this is the last you get of Darius, is a declaration, the same as Nebuchadnezzar was, of the sovereignty of God above all things. And their declaration is a little bit different because their situations were a little bit different. Nebuchadnezzar, his was, this is a God who tears down kings, rises them up. He establishes and he destroys. He is the ultimate king. And for Nebuchadnezzar, the reason is because the last thing we get from him was the madness that he was driven from his throne for a while until he acknowledged who God was. So Darius is here. It's similar, but it's a little different. His is like he works wonders. It is what he does. He works signs and he works wonders in heaven and on earth. In other words, he's over all of it. He controls the lions. He controls it all. In other words, Darius is making the command. He is sovereign. And as I said, if you get nothing else out of any of this study that we've done, just that one point, because that one point that God is sovereign should bring such strength and courage and hope for the believer, no matter what situation they find themselves in. Even at the end of a believer's life, they have hope. Why? Because God's promises are true. They don't stop even at death. They are timeless. They are endless. They go beyond. And the promises are true. No matter what government rises up, we have hope because God truly is the sovereign over the kings. And so no matter what happens, and remember, ultimately, we're going to get to the book of Revelation. No matter what happens with the plagues, the judgments for the believer, we don't have to worry because God is sovereign. The believer doesn't have to fret when they turn on the news and what they hear about is climate change, the world's going to destroy. We don't have to worry about that. Why? Because God is sovereign. The whole hope of the believer rests on the sovereignty of God. And that brings strength and hope. Now, for the events of this, I always like to give the dating of this. The dating here, it's a little more obscure because it doesn't even actually tell us. It just says it pleased Darius to do this. So that it's going to leave it so it's probably pretty early on, depending on who this Darius is. We have an idea that Darius the Mede, he was established by King Cyrus, most likely, just to oversee it until Cyrus could finish his conquering of Babylon and conquer the area before Cyrus would take power. But some things that are going on, Cyrus is gaining power, and there's a group of people, keep this in mind, who are gaining favor with King Cyrus. And that's the Jews. The Jews are gaining favor. Cyrus actually likes them. We're never told from a human perspective as why. From the spiritual aspect, well, because this was God's sovereignty at work. That God ordained that Cyrus would rise up and he would set them back home. And that's what Daniel was looking forward to. And we also know about this Darius that he only reigned for about 3 years. So it kind of gives a really narrow time frame. So we get a timing event here of about 539 to about 538 BC. That's kind of the time frame here. And so Darius, he comes to power, and he's trying to decide, how am I going to rule over this? And so Darius kind of follows the example of King Cyrus and one of the others. He decides to appoint people ahead of his kingdom. It's kind of what he does. So he decides to set 120 satraps to oversee it. So just kind of like governors. If you think, even in our areas, as time's gone on, even where we live, the areas are continuing to get divided into governance. And now they're pretty much all marked by signs. Even the area that we live in now, when you drive out of the city and you come in, we now have a sign that just, what's it called us? It just calls us a group of rural communities. So instead of giving us a name, we just get a title. But whether you like it or not, technically we're overseen by a governing body. There is a council that gets elected that oversees it, and these events take place. And why? It's because they're the ones who are responsible for things like taxes that come in, ultimately what happens, taking care of things. But they have no real power in government, but they just administer areas. And this is what Darius has done. He's following the example of another who, you can look up his name, but he set up like 40 over everything. And Darius follows that and he sets up 120. Now 120 would be a pain to deal with. It really will. If you've ever been on a board that gets larger, and I've been on some and meetings and some, and I remember meetings that we had to establish something and to make plans, and I think there was something like 18 people on it in the meeting. The meeting lasted for 2.5 hours, and when I tell you, by the end of that, nothing was accomplished. Too many people, too many opinions. And so I contacted the other person who kind of oversees things with me. We got together, sat down, in half an hour we had everything planned out. Sitting across from the table from each other, just talking. And so you can imagine Darius isn't going to want 120 people coming in and giving reports. So what does he do? He finds 3 administrators. I'm going to appoint 3 administrators. And sure enough, one of these administrators, he's like, well, who am I going to choose? Hey, there's this guy, Daniel. He's experienced. His track record's pretty good. And why not? I'm going to appoint him. He's been here from the previous reign. You mind, Darius took over, but Daniel was around. Darius was around during Nebuchadnezzar. He was there during Belshazzar. He was there during his father, even though he might have been in more retirement setting. And Darius is like, I'm going to keep this guy around. Not only that, he gives him a title is used here. Then Daniel distinguished himself above the governors and satraps because an excellent spirit was in him. That's actually very similar to what Nebuchadnezzar's daughter said. If you're not familiar, that'd be Belshazzar's mother. She said he has an excellent spirit in him. Even if they didn't recognize what it was, they recognized there was something about Daniel that they wanted. He was educated and he was skilled. And so Darius is like, I'm going to make him one of the three administrators. There's probably also another reason for this. Got to remember, this portion now is made up of multiple groups of people. It's got the Medos and the Persians, who probably would have moved in. It's going to have former Babylonians and the Jews. So why not choose somebody who's going to know the people? He's going to know their customs. He's going to know how they handle things. Especially when you've got the guy above you, Cyrus, who's looking favorably at them. He's like, so we need to do this. And there's precedence for this. And what I mean by that is when the Assyrians conquered the northern kingdom of Israel, they exported almost everybody. They're like, we're going to move everybody out and we're going to take the land. They didn't do Nebuchadnezzar, which was, I'm going to take all the good people and leave the poorest of the poor to tend the lands. No, they moved everybody and moved their people in. And then they started worshiping whatever gods they wanted, and then the Lord sent lions amongst them. And then they go, okay, what are we supposed to do here? And the Syrian king's like, okay, we understand what's going on here. And they're like, we don't know how to worship this God. So what did he do? He took some Levites and moved them back and said, okay, you know what to do. So here Darius is, why not? He's doing a good job. The guy's really too old to go anywhere by now, but he's got the knowledge and the wisdom. He can be in charge. Let him run things while I can focus on other things. And that sounds good. That's Daniel's track record. Think about it. Nebuchadnezzar brings him in. He's not even consulted the first time when Nebuchadnezzar has his dream, but Daniel proves trustworthy and proves true. And Nebuchadnezzar's like, I'm moving you up the chain. And Daniel always did. And so Darius is doing the same thing. But this doesn't seem, it seems like they didn't have a problem when Daniel was one of the three administrators. He can stay in his lane. He can take care of those uppity Jews and their special needs. He can take care of that. But they didn't like the fact that he's getting ahead. And there's probably some good reasons here. We're going to ask the question, why? Why? So I'm calling this, this doesn't allow me to do underlining. So the title, plot and reason here. The first thing they may not like, it may just be a racial thing. You don't think about it, but these are most likely Medes and Persians who are in this position. And you're allowing somebody who's not one of us in a position of authority over us. And so they just may not like this. It's just possible. This is what's going on here. It's like, why is that Jew being promoted over me? And they might run into that problem. And so they're like, how we need to get rid of him. And that does happen. Nowadays, we just call it equal representation kind of thing. And it's like, how can and if Daniel gets in power, what do you think he's going to do? He's going to take away the stuff from the Medes and the Persians. He's going to take our special abilities, and he's going to promote nothing but Jews. It's like, we don't want that, because he's in charge of everything, so we're going to be caught. So there could just be kind of a racial thing. And by racial, I'm using our modern definition of that. They had no definition for racism that way. They would cultural or nationalism kind of aspect is what's going on here. And so they have that problem. The other problem that they could be running into that they don't like ties right into it is the Jews are getting attention from Cyrus, and they're not. They're worried they're going to lose their place. They're like, we were born into this, and they're going to allow this? A great kind of example of this from the New Testament, where you can almost hear a little bit of like almost disdain from it, was when the Apostle Paul was being beaten, and then the commander didn't know what to do, so he kind of drug him into the tent. So what am I supposed to do with you? And then Paul comes back and he says, I'm a Roman citizen. And they went back and they told the leader, and says he's a Roman citizen. And he's afraid, and he walks in, and the guy asks a question. How did you become a Roman citizen? And he's like, and the guy's response, he goes, it's like, I had to pay a good sum to become a Roman citizen. How did you get it? And it's almost like this disdain for it. And Paul's like, I was born it. And now he became afraid for various reasons. But you almost got that disdain. It's like, how did you get it so easy? And I had to work for it. And so you've got a group now that the Jews just suddenly are there, and they've been known as troublemakers. And all of a sudden they're getting attention, and they're thinking, hey, we're being left behind. We don't like this. And so their plot here, this is where the plot's, because those are the reasonings. Obviously, I'm making a bit of assumptions here. But their plot here, why did they go about the way that they did? So if this took place very early in Darius's reign, and as I said, you got to understand here that, yes, Medo-Persians got moved in, but you still got Babylonians and Jews inhabiting this place. And so why would this be such a good way to stop Daniel? Because they're watching Daniel. And they're watching him closely. And they're trying, and it says they're looking for reason to get rid of him. And if you notice, the first thing that they look for is that they're looking to see, can we catch him in anything? And it says that so the governors and satraps, this is verse 4, sought to find some charge against Daniel. And it says, concerning the kingdom. So they're looking for something, because remember, they're planning, they don't just want Daniel out of the way here. They want him gone. And I mean for good. They want no chance of him ever coming back. So they're looking for subversion. They're looking for a crime against the crown. Stealing from the king would be an executable offense. And that's what they're looking for. And they could find no fault in anything. And it even goes even further. It says, but they could find no charge or fault concerning the kingdom. And it says, nor could they find any error. So given he's an administrator, they're probably auditing his books very, very closely to see if there's even a cent missing. Again, using modern terms here. I do like one of the videos that my kids have. They watch from time to time. On Daniel, they actually have a guy coming up to Daniel's table, and he's got to pay his dues. And Daniel tells him how much he owes. Like, you owe 50 shekels. And the guy's like, here, I've got 30 and 5 for yourself. And Daniel's like, no, it's 50. And he's like, oh, no, it's all right. Just take the 5, mark it as 30. Here's the 5, and you go away. And you actually see Daniel become indignant in it. And he's like, if you don't pay what you're owed, I will call the guards. The guy's like, fine, here's the 50. And you see the other administrators there watching Daniel. It was a setup. Now, obviously, that's just artistic licensing. But given the fact that it says here in the text that no error or fault was found, it seems like they're probably going over his books closely, looking for anything that they could catch him in. And they realize they're not going to catch it. So where do they look? They said, well, the only thing we can catch him in is we've got to make a law that will go contrary to his God. Because if there's one thing they learned about Daniel, he holds the law of his God above anything else. Which means if it goes against the law of the king, he's going to choose God. And yet they run into a problem here. Darius likes Daniel. So how are you going to pull this off? Now notice verse 6. Now I'm using the New King James. But there's a word here that gets used. So the governors and the satraps thronged before the king. They thronged before him. This isn't just they came before the king. They didn't just walk in. They flooded him. They just surrounded him. And their whole argument here was to make sure the king did not have time to think. That's their goal. Because if the king stopped and thought closely about what was going on, and he had time to figure it out, he may realize that there's a problem with this law. There's times when you're younger and things, you got to go, wow, I didn't think that through. Where you do something and then afterwards you go, whew. And sometimes it works out all right. Other times, well, not so well. I'll give you a true one here. That looking back, we can't figure out why nobody warned us. Or nobody gave a warning. Before my wife and I were married, even before we were engaged, she was in the Bahamas. She came back. And we've both been working all summer and saving up. Because our plan was, we knew when we went back to school, we were both going to move off dorm. And one thing, if you live off dorm, there's something you need. Transportation. Now, she got a place farther outside the city United. I got a place inside the city. But still a good distance from the school. And so we decided we needed a car. And so what did we do? When she came back, we both pooled our money and we went and we bought our first car. Think about this. We're not married. We're not even engaged. We bought a car. And we look back on that and we go, why didn't anybody tell us, maybe you should stop and think. Are you sure about this? Because what would have happened had we broke up? We decided, you know what? We're not good together. Now what do we do with the car? Because here's the thing. The car was all in my name. I was the Canadian. That's the way it was. The insurance was in my name. And we look at that and we go, why didn't my parents or her parents or our friends go, are you sure about that? Did you stop and think about this? It never even clued in. And then we finally, when we asked them, they all went, you know what? We never thought of that either. We just, by the nature of it, we just all assumed that you guys would end up married. And I remember even before we were engaged, we were attending the wedding of our friends. It was Sheena's ex-roommate, my ex-podmate. And we were at their wedding. We were in their wedding. And we were sitting there, and everybody naturally assumed that she and I were going to be the next to get married. It was just the way it was. But so that's an example of something that, you know what? Why did nobody get us to stop and lay this out and think about it? Now, we may have just passed it by and said, okay, that's fine, but we don't see that problem. But we didn't think about it. And this is where they wanted Darius. When they brought this law before him, they brought it with such force and such commitment and so quickly. Like I said, it used New King James uses the word, they thronged him. Like they just kind of rushed in, surrounded him and saying, King Darius, there's a problem in this kingdom. And there's a problem that can arise, and we want to stop it before it ever arises. And most likely, this is a loyalty test. We want the people to prove that they are loyal to you. We don't want those former Babylonians worshiping their gods and thinking that they're going to go their own way and establish their own king. And so Darius, we've got to come. And now Darius, sign a decree. And you got to do it quick. Just put a stop on this. That just for 30 days, that they've got to show their undying loyalty and fealty just to you. That you are above all. And remember, the Babylonians really aren't going to have a problem with that if they swear fealty to Darius. They have no problem with that, seeing the king as a son of a god or anything like that. And they're rushing this because their goal isn't, they don't care about the Babylonians. They only care about Daniel. And if the king had time to stop and think, he probably would have gone, that's a good idea, but I want to make an exception. Daniel, my most trusted advisor, because he serves his God so well, he serves me well. So I want to make an exception. They don't want that to happen. They want Darius to rush this and do it without thinking. And it seems Darius caught on later that that's what happened. Because if you look, and we're going to jump here a little bit, that when this took place, notice verse 14. Verse 14. And the king, when he heard these words, he was greatly displeased with himself. Not the administrators, not Daniel, with himself, because he's going, I should have caught this. I should have thought this through. I allowed this throng of people to come on me, this pressure to come on me, and I didn't think the repercussions of this law. They played to two things. They played to his fear for control, and they played to his ego. It's like, look how good I'm going to be, and they need to acknowledge it. And in the end, he's like, I got no one to blame except me. He's like, this is my stupidity. I overlooked this. He's like, and it's a good chance it just cost me the best employee I have. My best one. And so that was the trap. It wasn't just, hey Darius, let's go. No. It was a loyalty test. And when you understand that this is early in the reign, it makes perfect sense why they could bring it forth. They planned it out. They're like, we got something here. And we can't say, oh, it's because of Daniel. No. King, you need to establish yourself. You need to find out who's really for you and who's not. Who's going to cause trouble in your kingdom? Who's going to build an underground resistance that's just going to fight you all the way? And here's how you can do it, King. For the next 30 days, they pray only to you because you deserve it. You deserve loyalty. You deserve that respect. And he signs it. And he signs it. Immediately. And so with that, we already know what happened because we've read the text. Daniel, he reads this and he hears about it. And it says, now the king, when he went to his palace, verse 8, I'm back up here. That now when Daniel, verse 10, knew that the writing was signed, he went home. That sounds good. And what's he do? He goes in his upper room with his windows open towards Jerusalem. Now, this is an interesting thing. And I'm going to tell you why. There's something in here. Nope, not that one. This one. I'm going to ask some questions to ask. Why not pray at other times? Why didn't Daniel pray in the middle of the night when they couldn't watch him? Why with his window open? Why at that time? And the reason I'm asking these questions, because there's no law that Daniel is following here. There's no law in the Old Testament that says you must pray at these specific times. Notice that it says, when Daniel went home, he knew he was writing, in his upper room with his window open towards Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times that day and prayed, gave thanks before his God, as was his custom. Not the people's custom. It was his custom. There was no law saying Daniel had to pray at these times. Now, most likely, Daniel is praying, like many of them did do, as they had the same custom. They prayed at the 2 times, the morning and the evening sacrifices. Since they couldn't offer the sacrifices, all it does is they prayed that way. Daniel threw in a third one. He offered a midday prayer. What's also fascinating is that they seem to wait until Daniel prays the 3 times. They're like, oh, there's one. Let's get as many witnesses as we can. Here he is. Oh, he'll do it again. Because they probably weren't sure. But the question does arise. Why didn't Daniel just change his patterns? Why not go in the inner room? Remember, what did Jesus tell the Pharisees to do, or the disciples when he prayed? When you pray, go in your closet and pray. Why didn't Daniel just do that? Why didn't he just do it in secret? Why did he do it at the exact same time with his window wide open for anybody to see? Because he couldn't. This is the real lesson here from Daniel for us. Would it get him in trouble? Absolutely. But he would not change his custom because somebody else got upset. Why? Because this is my custom before God. This would be like if you go out, if you're married and you go out in public and you like to tell your wife that you love her and that she's beautiful. And somebody comes along and says, stop saying that. Just so you know, according to the, this is true, it can be interpreted this way. According to the laws of sexual harassment, the way they are, that if somebody overhears you say something to somebody else and it makes them uncomfortable, you've committed sexual harassment towards them. And so in other words, and it is interesting because if you read it, in other words, if somebody goes up to their spouse and they make a comment to their spouse that makes somebody else uncomfortable, now they probably never persecute you for this, but truthfully, that could be classified as sexual harassment. So does that mean I should never tell my wife she's beautiful and I love her in public? Not a chance. Why? Because my wife, sorry, as this is going to say, is more important to me than a stranger on the street. I may show love towards a stranger on the street, but my wife is whom I am one flesh with. So when it came to Darius and God, Daniel's like, I refuse to hide my worship for God. And I think that is a lesson for the church. Because we live in a culture that says, keep your religion in your buildings. And we should be going, not a chance. My God does not dwell in a house built by men. That was Paul's statement. God does not live in a house dwelled by men. Now David had that problem, if you look in the Old Testament as well here, where David's like, it's like, I'm living in this palace that God gave me. I need to build a house for him. And God's like, what are you doing? Did I ever ask you to do that? It's like, I don't need it. He's like, I'm glad you want to do that, but you're not going to be the one who does it. But I don't need it. Did I ever ask them to do it when the tent was going around? Because God doesn't dwell in a place of men. And so there's no reason the church should hide what they teach, what they do, and how they live just because it's going to make people uncomfortable, or if the time comes that the law says you cannot. And so you get here with Daniel, the great example is he could have changed how he worshipped. He could have changed when he prayed. He could have closed the window. He could have changed his location, which would have had no effect on the prayer itself. But he says, no, I am going to pray. And when they come back, and I want you to note the accusers. When they come back, notice that they don't just come back and simply say Daniel broke the law. They need to come back and they need to play to the king again to make sure he understands what happened here. So they come before the king and spoke concerning the king's decree. It's like, sir, we have a question for you. Have you not signed a decree that every man who petitions any god or man within the next 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast in the den of lions? There's the crutch of their trap. To make sure the king understands. They're trying to, like it or not, this is also a trap for Darius. Because why? They need to catch Darius here. Because they know who Darius is. They know his heart towards Daniel. And the king replies, this is true. I signed such a decree. And he adds, and according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter. This was a problem in the book of Esther too. If you remember the book of Esther, even though Haman has been deposed, he's gone, there was still a law signed that said on this day you can loot and rob and take advantage of the Jews. When Esther and Mordecai get the king's ring to try to undo this, notice that the one thing they don't do is just cancel the day. They can't. The law is the law. It's already in the books. It has to come to pass. So what did they do? They added an amendment. They added a second law. On this particular day, we give the right to Jews to defend themselves in any way that they feel necessary. Yeah, it's a lot harder to rob somebody when they're waiting for you. So Darius, they make sure Darius understands this. Did you sign this as a law, O king? He's like, yes, I did. And according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, it cannot change. And they're like, good. That's exactly what we needed to hear. And why? He goes, because that Daniel, who is one of the captives from Judah, that's how I think that the problem was a racial thing. Because they used that language. who's a cat. That Daniel, if they just wanted rid of Daniel because they just didn't want him in that position, they didn't like him, it would just be that Daniel who's one of your administrators. He's shown his true colors. But no, it's like that Daniel, who's one of the captains of Israel, he does not show due regard for you, O king, or the decree that you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day, which tells me they waited all 3 times. They let Daniel go the entire day. And you better know that they were probably going, oh, this is going to be good. They're like, hey, come see it, come see it, come see it. They made sure there wasn't just one witness who could, make a false accusation. Not 2, not 3. They got as many as they could. Check this out. And they said, look, he makes his petition. And it says, as soon as the king heard these, he was displeased with himself. Because the king realized the trap. So you're talking here, this is either the same day or the next day, depending on when the decree came. Because we're not entirely sure. If it came in the morning, then it was that day. If it came in the evening after Daniel had made his 3rd prayer, then you're talking the next day, kind of thing. We're not sure, but either way. But it was one that they brought forth as quick as they could. They want him gone. And you have Darius, once he knows his mistake, it says he was doing whatever he could to deliver him. And you can imagine probably some things that he's thinking about. Like, he knows he can't change the law, kind of thing. And so he's probably thinking, what can I do? Well, maybe I could feed the lions. Because they're hungry lions. What if I threw a whole bunch of meat in before Daniel was thrown in there? It's like, that might do it. Alas, he can't do that because that would be shown. He might even go, like, well, what would happen if I took the lions out and also says I got to throw them in a den of lions? I'm going to play a technicality here. Take the lions out and throw them in the lion's den. Sorry, the lions were out at the time. Not home. But he knows, the more he probably thinks of this, the more he realizes he's trapped. He understands that the den of lions is a death sentence. And anything he does to physically change this situation, feed the lions, whatever, it's going to show the problem. And he can't do it. So the only thing that seems that he kind of does to give Daniel the best shot as possible is to keep him in there as little as possible. And so he's fighting the entire time. If you look at it, he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. Then these men approached the king and said to the king, know, O king, that by the law of the Medes and the Persians, that no decree or statute the king established may be changed. He waited for like the last second possible, trying to find a way out of this. And so, according to the law, he throws him in. And he leaves him there for as little as possible, because it says as soon as he could, he went back. And that night the king did not even partake of any of his pleasures. He didn't have any of his food, and some try to argue that was a euphemism for his concubines. Doesn't matter here. That would make kind of sense. You could think that he maybe has an evening feast that he didn't partake of. It doesn't matter here. Either way, he just denied himself any of the pleasantries, his musicians, anything. And even sleep was kept from him. Why? Because he was so anxious and worried that he just could not sleep, is what was going on here. And in the end, what does he do? He comes back first thing in the morning. And Darius seems to know about the king of Daniel. And I imagine he did. I don't think Daniel got to the position that he was in without a few conversations to the king. And Daniel probably told the king about God. And you notice that one of the things that also took place is that the stone was brought there, laid across the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own ring. Why would he do this? Yeah, that's most likely what he's thinking. That they're going to go right back in behind, kill him, and say the lions did it. And he's like, I'm making sure I'm giving Daniel the best chance that I can. He's got to be in there for as little as he can, and I'm going to make sure nobody can go in. Because when I come back and check, that seal better be intact. And what's he also make the people do? To seal it too. It says he signet and the signet of his lords. So in other words, I think he's making sure that nobody can get in. And so the king shuts it up and he comes back. And he comes back to Daniel. And it even tells the tone of his voice, a lamenting voice. In other words, the king, he knows who God is, but he's not hopeful. He really isn't. He's coming in, he's like, maybe, just maybe. I'm hoping against hopes here. And he's like, Daniel, and he says, servant of the living God, has your God whom you serve continued been able to deliver you from the lions? Imagine his surprise when Daniel calls back to him. He's like, Daniel, and because he's lamenting, he's like, this is a hope amongst hope. I'm just like, I'll just try. I'm going to try. Daniel, are you there? He's like, oh, king, live forever. If there's a time that the idea that your spirit could jump out of your body, I bet you that's happened to the king here. He's like, whoa, like, what on earth? Like, you got to be kidding me. He's like, this is insane. And you know that the other leaders, they're not even giving this a thought, because it seems like he came by himself. Those other leaders, they're probably sitting home, feasting, celebrating. Go, oh, today's going to be a good day. And here you got Daniel going, like, look, and I will tell you what happened. My God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth so that he would not hurt me because I was innocent before him. And also, O king, I've done nothing wrong to you. It's interesting that he says that, isn't it? He makes sure that the king knows, like, king, my worshiping God is not an affront to you. It has no bearing on my service to you. In fact, it makes me the best administrator because I fear God and I'll serve you. And the king is rejoicing here, and he pulls Daniel out. He's exceedingly glad, commanded that he should be taken out of the den. So Daniel was taken out, and it says to the point that no injury was found. That's a direct playback, if you think of the fiery furnace. When they come out, they were no longer bound, and not even the hint of smoke was on them. Same things like this same God who can deliver. And then Darius, what's he do? The king gave the command and brought those men who accused Daniel. So it's not all of them, but it's those men who delightfully came and are like, hey, king, Daniel broke the law. Daniel broke it. What does he do? He throws them in. And the whole families, that was the custom. You don't just take care of them, you take care of the whole problem. And notice what it says. The lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces before they ever came to the bottom of the den. Now here's the point of this. And what I come down to, that God can save the righteous and punish the wicked. When I look at an event like this from Daniel, it reminds me of Abraham at this point, talking to God overlooking Sodom. And he asks the question, God of all the earth, will you not do what is right? Will you destroy the righteous with the wicked? And God proves that he can save the righteous and still punish the wicked. Time and time again, Noah in the ark, what happens? Noah walked with God and was considered righteous in his generation. Only Noah and his family survived. Sodom and Gomorrah, there was only one righteous. That was Lot, and he was delivered. The city of Jericho, there was a righteous one found. It was Rahab. She survived. Even in the land of Egypt, God says, I'm going to make a distinction between my people and the Egyptians. And the plagues did not touch the land of Goshen again. And when you look you look at the plagues that will come later in Revelation, this is why people get afraid. You look at it and you go, is that going to hit everybody? God protects his own. God can protect the righteous. When you say that God is sovereign, it's not just God sovereign over the events. He is so sovereign that he can make it rain in one spot and not in another. That he can have a plague hit so far and stop at his command. He can make it avoid who he wants it to avoid. He can make a judgment, do whatever he wants to do. This is the sovereignty of God. And here what you saw, those lions which were supposed to execute judgment, that was their job. When the righteous was put before that judgment, what happened? Nothing. Daniel stayed there a night in the lion's den with hungry lions around him, not touching. And when the wicked came, those lions of judgment, what happened? They absorbed them before they could even touch the ground. They didn't have a chance. And it shows that God, who is judge, will do what is right. And he can deliver his people. And in the end, you get Darius' proclamation. And what does Darius conclude? That God is the living God. He is steadfast forever. His kingdom is the one which will not be destroyed. His dominion shall endure to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. And he says, and to prove it, he delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. In other words, in the end, who got the glory? Not Daniel. Not Daniel saying, look, Daniel was such a righteous person, the lions didn't touch him. No. It was God who got the glory. And in the end, that's where it should be. All right. We'll stop there for this evening. That brings us right about to our time. I got us right there at 6:57. I always love to give a chance now. If there's any questions, feedback, comments that people like, you can make them if you're joining us online. You can write them in the comments and I can answer them. Or if you don't want to write them in the comments, you can send me a question later and I can respond back to you. As I said, for the most part, if you grew up in Sunday school, you grew up in VBSs, you probably are very familiar with Daniel. But I hope it still gives a reminder and a little bit of insight. Or not. Any questions, comments, queries?
I think there was something else that was not written there, was this, everybody, I think, in the community knew that this was happening and why it was happening. Because the decree doesn't explain. What do you mean he saved Daniel from the lion's den? What's that? But they all knew of the decree, and they all knew that Daniel was put in there. That didn't need to be explained.
Yeah, it's true. He didn't. He just said, here's the decree. That's the way it goes.
I think sometimes we think too, because of all the videos we've seen there, that Daniel was a young man. Daniel was not a young man when this happened.
Oh no, he was 80s.
He was in his 80s.
Yep. 80-year-old man. Yep.
He wasn't very tasty.
Didn't taste very good. But yeah, it's one of those things. And I also caution what happens in a little off the side. One, this is where videos can be good, but also can be a problem because it infects how we view something. And two, we often attribute certain words in our understanding. A great example of this is when Ishmael and Hagar were sent away from Abraham and Sarah, because Sarah sends them away, and it calls him the child. Says she put the child there and then walked away. When we think of that word, we think of something that's really young. And in fact, even in the dramatized audio Bible I like to listen to, if you look in the background when the angel's talking to Hagar, I said look, but listen, I should say, it has almost like a baby crying. But there's a problem with that. The term child there can actually just mean a youth, somebody who's not quite a man yet. He would have been about 13 to 15. He's not a child like how we would think. Because we associate it like infant, toddler, child, teen, grown up kind of thing, adult. Or they don't. They just go from infant, child, adult. That's kind of how it works. So it's the same when you think of Elisha and the situation with the bears. It's like, he called out bears to maul these teens. No, the word actually is young men. And just so you know, the curse there, it seems weird to ours if you don't understand it. He says, go up, you bald head. It's like, he cursed them because they were calling him bald. That's not what it was. What they really were saying is a direct reference to Elijah. What did Elijah do? He went up. So they were literally telling him to go die. It's like, we want you dead. Go die, you curse. That's the curse that they were calling on him. And then what ends up happening is Their curse had no power. His did. And the bears came. These weren't children mocking him. They weren't teens. They were young men. Probably 20s. Early 20s. So it's one of those things. We tend to look through it through our lens. So yeah, Daniel's not a boy here. He's not a young man. He's in his 80s. He's an old man. Sorry for those who are getting up there. By their definition, he's an old man. Kind of thing. Hey, take pride that you're an old man. More so not according to Elihu. That's a book of Job. He's like, gray hair is not a necessary mean wisdom. Kind of thing, but yeah. All right. With that, I'd like to bid you a good night and a good evening to you. Not much in the way of announcements, just in mind that most of our programs have come to their seasonal conclusion. We've had our season conclusions happening here, so most of the things are on break, but we're still going to be having our morning services continue to go on. Those don't change. 10:30 every Sunday morning. Come on out. It's a great time together to share, to worship, to sing, and to study together. Then our evenings will continue on from at 6 o'clock. Keep a note, our annual tradition usually starts about July that we switch to outdoor services, which means there may not be as many live recordings, although I may be able to do that. I have a lot more data on my phone than past years, so I can probably still stream. But it's always, again, much better in person. So keep aware of that coming up. And for those of our church service, or church membership, we'll probably put a sign-up list for those who'd like to host a service. And we'll bring it right to you. But I'll tell you what that will mean is you won't get the nice fancy, you'll just get a video of me sitting outside teaching kind of thing. That's kind of the way it'll go. Other than that, it'll be our summer activities. More information will come up. Our fun day will come up in July, and our VBS, which I'll tell you this year, we're going to be looking at Joseph, and our VBS will be in August. So keep in mind for those. Other than that, as always, I pray that the Lord would watch over you, that he would bless you in all that you do, but ultimately, may you live a life that is glorifying to him and points people to Jesus. May his blessing be with you. Till next time.